So we're very excited to be here this afternoon with something that's so close to our heart. And I want to, maybe Phoebe, you can start and just give us a bit of background why we love this so much.
Okay, so I really love screen time as a parent, don't you? Am I alone? Okay, so our journey with screen time as parents started before we had children. We were going to be perfect, absolutely perfect in every way. And we decided our kids would not be on screens because we knew vaguely that screens are bad. I didn't really know why. I didn't really want to know why. It's kind of like an ostrich in the sand, head in the sand, but I wasn't going to put my kids on screens. And then we had kids. And lockdown happened, and I was working from home, and life happened, and before I knew it, I had 2 kids hunched over a phone for hours. And I shudder now to think back to those days, but it happened.
So let's just be real. Screen time does have benefits. It can be educational, it can improve fine motor skills, and it can promote creativity. But at the end of the day, that's not why most of us use it, because for 2 hours of peace and quiet, that is why we embrace screen time. There's no fighting, there's no yelling, there's no boredom. They are happy, invisible in their little world. They don't even get hungry. And that's the reason why we as parents love screen time. So it frees up our time as busy parents. But not all screen time is equal. So I just want to give a broad definition of what is screen time, specifically what we're going to be talking about in this talk. So I'm not talking about academic screen time, so homework, writing essays, research, those things. We are talking about entertainment screen time. And there's actually 3 categories of screen time. The first is called social screen time. That's when we interact with anybody. That's WhatsApp, video call, emails, anything that you communicate with somebody else. And then we have passive screen time, and that is what most of us grew up with, where we sit and watch a TV. And we watch one thing after the other, and it comes, and we don't really have control over it. We just get absorbed, and we watch the one thing after the other. So today, something like mindless scrolling is as a form of passive screen time. And then the third category, which is called interactive screen time, is something that changed the dynamics for the digital world for us, because it started with TV games, Nintendos and PlayStations. Today, even parents being on Candy Crush is a form of interactive screen time. It's when you have input that changes the output. And it's actually much more addictive. It's much more engaging, and it's actually much more overwhelming for a young individual that's growing up, for their brain to process that. So something happens that we call hyperarousal in the brain, where a kid is so focused on this input and this screen that they block out everything that's happening around them. And they focus on that, and that helps them. It's got an addictive nature because it releases those happy hormones, and everything else becomes, when it's calm, it becomes abnormal, because we used to busyness, energy, input, sensory input and stimulation all the time. So those are the things we're going to be talking about: social, passive, and interactive screen time.
So before we carry on, I just want to say we are all in this together, okay? In the last 15 years, content has become so cheap, available and in such large volumes. I mean, guys, remember watching Pumpkin Patch when you were little? Like, you had to wait till the next day. It was over, and then the next day, or you watch something, you watch a series, and then you have to wait a week for the next episode. That doesn't happen anymore. And it's so cheap, and there's so much of it. And so what happens is we are dealing with a problem that our parents didn't deal with, that our grandparents didn't have to deal with. And sometimes as parents, life is busy, and then we look in our toolbox and there's nothing. And we don't have time to figure out tools. We're in a situation, there's screens, and now we have to kind of make it up as we go. But we didn't have this. Our parents didn't teach us how. So we, as a new generation of parents, need to actually learn these tools and figure out how do we deal with these new threats that are coming in. So I just want to say today is not a guilt trip, okay? Today we're going to tackle this together. We're going to look at the things that are dangerous, and we're just going to find solutions.
Yes. So we're going to dive in straight into the topic, and there's 3 questions that we all ask when it comes to parenting with screens, and that is where do you do it? How do you do it? So is it no screens? Is it limited screens? Or is it uncontrolled screens? And the answer is actually yes, because in each developmental phase of your child, there's different things that they can access, and the game changes completely. So there's an analogy that we want to use to say that screen time is like driving a car. So you will never give a 3-year-old the keys of your car and say, go and drive. And just like that, you cannot dump the whole internet and the responsibility of navigating that on a 3-year-old. But there's some few steps between the 3-year-old and the 13-year-old and the 31-year-old that needs to happen. And there's a journey that we want to take you on to say, but how do we help our kids through those developmental phases that they can be successful? Successful in navigating screens, successful in driving, being independent, successful in keeping themselves and those around them safe. So there's a couple of things that I just want to highlight that's very similar between driving a car and having a screen. And one of them is, both of them will take you on a journey. It takes you out of the present state that you're in and takes you to a different place. So there's something that happens when you move on this journey, that you're not the same at the end of the drive or the end of the screen time that you were at the beginning. There's something that happens when you get behind the steering wheel where you get tunnel vision. And something exactly the same happens when you have that screen, that you forget about everything that's going on around you. You see right in front of you. There are dangers on the road that you need to learn how to navigate, and you have to have a plan. What do I do if this happens? What do I do if that happens? And it's the same with screen time. In both screen time and driving, we can fall into having blind spots, where we don't realize the habits that we have, and we need an outside perspective to say, just look here, just be careful, there's something that you might not be aware of. And if you ever drove past an accident scene, you realize that that vehicle that was meant to be a blessing can also be very destructive if not used in the right context. So there's a lot of things that we learn as we're driving and as we navigate screens, and one of those are that we have to interact with other people that we cannot control. Even if you are a law-abiding citizen, you have no guarantee that the person coming from the left is going to stop at the traffic light, because they have their own set of things that they do. And you hope that they abide by the rules of the road, but there's no guarantees. And that's what we want to teach children, to realize that there's a whole world out there that's going in different directions, and we need to give them the tools to know how to stay safe in that. So I want to ask 2 questions. Would you give your 8-year-old the car keys and say, go and meet some strangers, be back before supper? But we can so easily do that in our homes without realizing that. Would you ask your teenage daughter to say, here's the car keys, I want you, it's 10 p.m. Friday evening, please drive to Hillbrow, come back when you want to? And in our minds, we're like, we would never do that. But we don't realize that that is the access that technology gives us when we put that device in front of our kids. So strap in your safety belt. We're going to be on a journey as we learn how do we do this together.
Okay, so let's talk about what's so bad about screens. We're talking about these things, we're talking about the dangers of excessive and uncontrolled screen time, okay? Researchers are becoming increasingly concerned about the prevalence of screens. So in the 1970s, the average age that a child used to engage with digital media would be, well, not digital, it was just media then, was 4 years old, okay? But today it's 4 months that a child is engaging with media. And what's happening is this generation that's growing up is like a massive experiment, actually. We are running an experiment on our kids because the volumes that we are putting them on screen time has never been done in history. And they have not grown up yet. Scientists literally do not have the data yet for what is going to happen to them growing into young adulthood, growing into adulthood. We've got some young adults coming up, but they haven't been on the screen as much. We're still waiting. So we're going to start seeing more research coming out in the next 10 years. In a way, that scares me more than the research that's already out there, because I'm like, we don't know. So we're just going to give you a quick snapshot. We're not going to talk all day. We could, but we're not. We're going to split the dangers of screen time into 3 parts. The 3 parts of a human. So how it affects their body, their physical body, how it affects their soul, their social and their emotional side. And then I'm going to talk about the spirit. And here I'm going to define spirit as their belief system, their worldview, and their moral compass. Okay, and Harry's going to start with the body.
So first of all, growing up as a young child, there's different things that play a part in our development. There's different factors that make us who we are. So I've already mentioned one of the things is the hyperarousal of the brain, the state that it goes in. And for that, I've got an example here for us to understand how that works as well. So throughout our day, we have different activities, different projects, deadlines, meetings, and all of that can be represented with these colored balls that I have in this jar. And you see, between each of them, there's a gap that's not filled. And that used to be a time where we sensitize, when we used to think about life, when you go to your nothing box, when nothing happens, when you can actually pray or God can drop something in your heart, when you can reach out and meet a stranger and just say hello to them. But things have changed so much that the moment that we don't have something to do, we pull out our phone and this becomes full. There's no blank space anymore. And that creates this hyper arousal where we are so geared and so focused, and we struggle, our kids struggle to tone down and just to, I mentioned before that even normal sounds abnormal. When it's calm, it feels weird. So kids start acting out because they're trying to have that heightened sense of stuff that's happening all the time.
I think it's not just our kids, it's us too.
It's us as well, definitely, us as parents as well. So it leads to a lack of concentration. It actually leads to a thinning of the cerebral cortex, which is involved in processing information, memory, all of those things. It releases dopamine, our happy hormone. And because we feel happy, it becomes very addictive. And it's got it's got a resemblance of substance abuse because it creates such a strong craving that we want more and more and more. Just one more video, one more game, one more episode, just to the next level. And we can't seem to put those devices down. It interferes with the quality of our sleep. And very important is not just what it does to us, but takes away from us. Because the devices that we have removes us from the world that is so needed for kids to develop. It's when kids play and see and learn and interact with the world around them that they develop. And the moment you take them away from them and you just give them a screen, a lot of these developments don't take place because they're no longer playing with a friend. They're no longer bumping a toe. They're no longer playing in nature. So it's not just what directly happens to our body, but indirectly what happens when we take them from the world that they should be in.
Okay, so for the social and the emotional side, I'm just going to tell you a few things, but just think about each of these carefully. Screen time at high levels is correlated to depression and anxiety. I just want to let that sink in because we are looking at a generation that is more depressed and more anxious than ever before. And I'm not saying this is the only reason, but I'm saying if this is a reason, it's actually good news because it's something we can control. Screen time, it also affects emotional understanding. So, for example, a baby learns to read faces. But if a baby is on a screen the whole time, where do they learn to read a face? And for older kids and teenagers, it's social awareness and social interaction and learning to read Harry's body language, for example, and you don't get that on a screen. And even if you're interacting in social media, it's completely different. The value of that is much shallower. There are behavioral problems that happen like antisocial behavior. Impulse control, Harry mentioned that. So instead of just citing a whole list, I'm gonna tell you about one study. In one study, they studied kids who were on the screen for longer than 1 hour a day. Now, at a point in my house, that would have been like, wow, they only did 1 hour. I'm just being honest. And this results in a lower level of psychological well-being, less curiosity, lower self-control, more distractibility, more difficulty making friends, less emotional stability, being more difficult to care for, and an inability to finish tasks. That is a mouthful. Okay, but the thing that actually concerns me most about screens is not even the body and the social effects. It's the spiritual side of it. As a pastor, that's very concerning to me, and as somebody, as a Christian. But I think even if you're not a Christian, this is something. If you hold to conservative values, this is something we need to be thinking about. There's an unseen danger. It's very subtle and it's very hidden. It's the most dangerous thing because it's after the minds and the loyalties and the hearts of this next generation. I've studied the theory of storytelling for my career, and as you know, I specialize in communication to children. So I see how this gets done on the other side. So one of the first things they teach you in storytelling is that you have to, every story is about something. It's a theme. There's a theme that runs through a story like a golden thread. This can be good, it can be bad. Often it's determined by the storyteller, but usually it's the people who pay for it that decide what the message is, right? So this is the best way I can explain story. This theme thing. Stories fall flat when they don't have this. So if you're watching any content that is engaging in any way or entertaining in any way, trust me, there is something running through it. Even if you can't see it, I promise you it is there. It does not work. It literally does not work. So the way I think about this thing that gets woven into stories is when I got a puppy one day. It was my first dog. I hadn't grown up having a dog. And I took the dog to the vet, and they gave me a pill to give to the dog. And I got home, and I'm like, okay, drink the pill. Dog spits it out. And I'm like, okay, take the pill again, spits it out again. I'm like, okay, Google's going to have to help you. So I got a lump of peanut butter, thanks to Mr. Google. Put the pill in the peanut butter. Voila, it goes in. That dog did not know she was taking the pill. She thought she was eating peanut butter. And it's the same with story. That's why story is so powerful to change. Because people think they're eating the peanut butter. They think they're being entertained. But they don't know. Inside, there's a powerful message in there. Whatever those content creators decided on is in there. And they're swallowing that. And it's changing them. It's Romans 12 verse 2 says that you are transformed by the renewing of your mind. You become a different person when your mind starts getting changed. When you start thinking differently, you become different, and then you start behaving differently. And Luke talked about the teenagers that their minds start getting rewired while they're teens. Now think about that in context of this. What are we exposing our teens to? What messages are they getting? Because their brains are wired to be changing at that time. So if they're on social media the whole time, that's what's worrying them. It sounds like a conspiracy theory, but I really, really believe that there's moral messaging that's coming through that is degrading the fabric of our society. It's degrading the family structure. It is eroding our families. It directly opposes everything that is good, true, beautiful, pure in our world. And the problem is sometimes it looks good. Our kids might not be thinking about this deeply, but it's changing the way they think. It's changing. They call it brainwashing. Okay? And this happens, whether you want to believe it or not, whether you believe it or not, it doesn't matter. If you take this message in over and over and over again, it rewires your brain. So the thing is, we can lock the security gate around our home, but these devices have become a portal into our home. And these kids, people have access to our children right under our noses. In fact, we are encouraging it. I'm including myself in this. And there are people coming in We don't know them, we don't know their gender, we don't know where they come from, we don't know who's paying for that content, and we are letting them just go talk to my kid. And it's never been so easy to have access to a kid and to have access to their mind. So we want to talk about the practical side. So we don't want to dwell on that. We want to talk about what can we do practically. We want to put some tools in our toolboxes and say, this is how we can handle this. So the first thing we need to realize is we need to be practical, okay? We don't stop driving a car because in our society, you have to drive a car to go places. You're going to be driving, right? And the same with screens. We can't avoid them, but we can be as safe as we can. So we teach our kids good manners. We teach them to say please and thank you. We teach them to brush their teeth twice a day. We teach them eat a tomato, it's good for you. And just like we teach them good personal hygiene and manners, I think as modern parents, something that needs to be included in this is we need to teach them good screen hygiene. And we need to help them to grow into adults that can handle this in a healthy way. So Harry's going to talk you through a roadmap for this.
Okay, so awesome. So we talked about earlier that screen time is like driving. And just to give you a little bit of a picture of how that works and why we say like that is, I'm going to explain certain developmental phases for a child when it comes to driving. So when you have a little tiny baby, you strap them in the infant seat in the back of the car. They don't get to the front of the car, and they're definitely not behind the steering wheel, because there's something that's age appropriate, and a 2-year-old should not be allowed to drive the car. But when they get a little bit older and you've got toddlers, you know what? You can actually have them sit on your lap in the parking lot and hold the steering wheel. And they're going to say, I drove today, but the car wasn't switched on, because you are still in control. You are the one with your foot on the brake, the car is switched off, and even though they can turn this big steering wheel and they feel like they're driving, you make the decision. And when you relate that to screen time, it's when your kids get to an age where they can start using the remote and volume up and volume down and volume up and volume down and up and up and up and up and next DVD. And they feel that they have a sense of control and they can control this. But you select, these are the DVDs that you can put in that device. So even though they feel like they are big, you still control what do they access and how do they access that. Then as kids get a little bit older, they start interacting in the cars. Like, Daddy, why is there lines on the road? What does that big red sign mean? Daddy, slow down, it's yellow. You know, they give you lots of opinions on what is happening in the world around them. But it's also a time where they learn, how does this work? So they don't start driving yet, but they learn a lot about the world, sitting next to you, observing. And it's the same with screen time. It's a time when we can interact with our kids and say, you know what, let me tell you, what does this mean? What does the stop sign mean? Why don't I drive over a red light? Why do we do it like this? Why do we do it like that? And that time of communication is vital for them to be able to form a worldview that they can understand one day when they get their own car keys, how to operate it. Then as they get a little bit older, your teen is going to get a learner's license. Now, when they have a learner's license, still, you don't give them the keys of the car and put the full responsibility on their shoulders to say, go and be responsible. You sit there next to them in the car and you brake when they're supposed to brake. Stop, 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 stop. Okay, no, everything's fine. We're good. We're okay. And you learn side by side with them how to navigate. And then eventually they become young adults and they have their own vehicle. And they can drive the car without you. Are they going to make mistakes? Yes. Will the car be scratched? Yes. But hopefully by then you have empowered them enough that they are able to know more or less what to do to avoid those dangerous situations. So we're going to quickly run through the different age brackets that experts suggest on screen time, what is appropriate for each developmental phase. Phoebes, if you can maybe start by showing us for the 0 to 2-year-old range, what is expected there?
Okay, yes, certainly. So As Harry mentioned, a baby should be nowhere near the steering wheel of a car. In fact, the World Health Organization says no screen time, under 2. None. I know we don't want to hear that, but none. Except for video calls with family, so you can actually jippo it a little bit if you want. Okay, but basically, babies under 2 do not actually learn from their screens. Babies under 2 don't learn from their screens, even if it's educational. So all they're getting from that screen is overstimulation. That's literally all they are. And I think we all know now after the other talks that we should, kids need everything that they need. So we don't want to be taking away from the time that they need to be interacting with their environment and with the people around them. So yes, 2 to 4 years.
2 to 4 years, recommended is 1 hour of screen time, and this should preferably be educational. And just a note for that, just because the label says educational doesn't mean it's educational. Not everything on the App Store is really educational. Kids are not able to navigate the internet. They are able to, but they should not be. So you cannot put them on a YouTube stream and watch. Even if you choose a good Christian program, you don't know what is the next program going to be. You don't know what the algorithm's going to suggest next. You don't know what adverts they're going to see. So you still actually have no control over that. If you look at child-friendly apps like YouTube for Kids and you say, we're only watching kiddie programs, guess what? They filter out most adult content, and it's actually quite safe in that regard. But still, you don't know what is the messaging, as Phoebe's mentioned, that's coming through in that. So it's not something where you can leave them uncontrolled for watching program after program after program. Kids need to interact. We've mentioned that already. One of the things that's really important in this phase, developmental phase, is kids need to learn how to make mistakes. With a phone, if you make a mistake on the game, you start over. And there's no pain and there's no consequence. So kids are starting they grow up in an era where they have no resilience because they don't know how to overcome challenges. When you kick your toe against a rock, it really hurts, but next time you are more careful. And it's important for them to be plugged into the world around them, that they can learn how to make mistakes and how to overcome those. It's important for resilience, it's important for relationships, it's important how to navigate with the world around them.
So for 5 to 10 years, you are still in the driving seat, and you should still be very tightly controlling what your kids are watching. You might say, oh, they're older, they know now. No, they do not have the emotional capacity to deal with what's online. They do not have the wisdom to be able to do it. So 5 to 10 years, still very tightly controlled. The recommendation for this age group is 1.5 to 2 years, absolute max. And I want to actually say, you know what, if you can make it less, make it less. But, I said we have to control tightly, but more important for this age than controlling tightly is to actually start using this age as a time to start coaching them. So they need to start understanding it's not just daddy who says, I can't watch this. Daddy explains, we can't watch this because. How do you feel about this content that you watched? How did that make you feel in your heart? What do we think about this? And you start coaching them. And you start helping them you start guiding them to make decisions one day when they're behind the steering wheel. They need to start understanding the dangers of where they're going. They need to start understanding many of the places that they can't go online. And you can do this in age-appropriate manners. Just a note on that, by the time they're 7 to 8, you should have had the talk about mute content to them. Because guess what? Even if you tightly control at school, anybody can stick a phone in their face. And so this is something we need to talk about to them, okay? So yes, educate your kids about the decisions you're making. Don't just make the decisions, educate them. Okay, 11 years.
Just want to add on to that, give them an incentive to report to you when they see something that's wrong. So teach them to say, the moment that you see this thing, come and tell mommy, come and tell daddy. So they can know to have openness to come to you with what they see. Even if it was the friend's phone or the friend's house at school, let them come and have that open dialogue that you can know what's going on in the world and that they don't try and hide it from you. I think this is a lot of what was discussed already this morning. Open dialogue, open conversation. So moving on to 11 plus years. So for all the kids, the screen time is recommended a maximum of 2 hours of screen time, which can be extended with an extra hour for skill development, if they're into programming or story writing or whatever. But this is a very, very important age in a child's development, and it's important to realize what are the risks of social media and why you don't want to just expose them to that. So, you know, when we grew up and we did something that's really stupid, you had 3 friends that laughed at you, and tomorrow it's over. Today, when you do something really stupid, it ends up being watched by 3 million people on YouTube and commenting and giving you a piece of their mind. So to put that weight on a child that's 11 or 12-year-old, that is tremendous. When we look at social media and the need to be perfect, you're also putting a weight on that child because everything they see there is perfect, and they want to be perfect. The perfect background for this photo because it has to be just right, because everybody else is looking so perfect. And once again, you're raising them in a place that's unreal. If I were to ask you for the next week, I want you to be perfect. Perfect at church, perfect at home, perfect at work, look perfect, act perfect, talk perfect. That would be an unfair burden to put on anybody. But that's what social media does to someone who's still developing emotionally, socially, that don't know how to handle these pressures. Now they're walking around with that added pressure.
Can I just add there? As somebody who was bullied at school, my saving grace was that I could go home in the afternoon and not have to be around those people. And now online, if I was on social media, it would have been endless. It would have been relentless. You know, so, I mean, think about it. You know, we could at least escape back in the day. But now, these kids can't escape because they get home and their friends are still there.
And this is a phase where kids are starting to develop their own identity, to take their own, to test what mom and dad has been saying and see, how do I make this my own? And they often move away a bit or a bit closer, and they try and figure out who are they. And this is not the time that you want to expose them to billion-dollar companies that's out with a message to cause confusion. This is not the time when you want to give them unlimited access to people with different worldviews. This is the time where you want to hold them close, to say, we are walking with you. Through this journey where you are finding your feet, we are here with you. So we're going to run through just a couple of practical things. So how can we change this? How can we make this better? How can we try and implement something better in our family? And this will be different for each and every family because your needs are different, your family structure is different. So these are guidelines and tools to put in your toolbox, and you can decide, how am I going to build a strategy for my home? How am I going to build a plan that works for us? So first point that's very, very, very important is we want to set a limit to screen time. So there's not uncontrolled access all the time. If there's screen time in the house, what are the boundaries for screen time? Okay, so just want to add to that, oftentimes kids say, I'm bored. You know what? Boredom never killed anyone. It's actually great for your development. Give a child 2 bricks and a rock, and they will start building something with that. So it's okay to be bored, and it's okay not to have it all the time. So fill their life with other things. Give them opportunities to participate in a sport or to learn an instrument or have other options that they can choose from. You can decide what time we start screen time, what time we stop. Or you can have a rule to say no screens at the dinner table. So that's something that you can decide how you want to manage that. And then we want to say establish screen zones. To say, okay, screens will be allowed here. In the living room, this is our family screen time. preferably in a high traffic area, lots of people moving through. Don't encourage them to say screen time is for behind locked doors in your bedroom. Use screens as part of the family, but there where it actually can be monitored from a distance. Experts say delay as long as you can. Delay as long as you can, even if you have to get a really dumb phone for your child that can only SMS and call until they're a little bit older. I was listening to the guys on Focus on the Family, and the one said, you know what, his kid kept on asking when, and when he's like, oh, I'll speak to your mom and we'll think about it. And he was able to just postpone that for another 2 years. And eventually they got him a phone at age 13 and 14 and 13 or 14. So delay as long as you can.
I want to just jump in there for a moment. I remember having to use the payphone very seldom as a teenager. We arranged, we knew my mom is coming at 2 o'clock to pick me up, and lo and behold, most of the time she was there. And sometimes she was late and then I waited. So a lot of parents say, oh, I need to get my child a phone because they need a phone. But, okay, there aren't payphones anymore. But you can get your child a very dumb phone that can't connect to the internet. And, yes, you will be paying for SMSs. Yes, you will be paying for phone calls. But a few rand in the light of your child is not, for me, it's not anything.
Yeah, there's a scientific study done now in the UK where they tested over 100 kids. And they actually found that if kids don't have the latest devices, they actually don't die. They actually, okay. So even if it sounds harsh, if you think about it, are you ready to expose your 10-year-old to predators, scammers, industries that's there to take advantage of them, to keep them engaged, illicit content? And then you start to think, maybe another year, maybe we can wait just a little bit more. They will be okay. Then very important, it's important that the house knows who is the driver. Even if children has different devices, you are the one that sets the rules. You are the one that have access to all devices. There's no device with a pin that mom and dad can't get in. This is my house. These are my devices. You are privileged to use them, but I want access to them whenever I want. There's no secrecy. There's nothing that's worth keeping secrets from your parents. And we've seen even from Luke's talk this morning the power of secrecy and how that entraps children. So there is no excuse to have secrets from our parents there. Then screen the content as good as you can. There's a great resource that we use from Focus on the Family. It's called Plugged In. They review games, TV shows, movies. It's a great resource to just go before you buy the thing to see, is it something that you agree with and want to allow? And it's easier to do that before you buy it. Once you've bought it, now it's a more difficult conversation to have to say, give it back, we're going to destroy this, or this is not good. So try and screen ahead of time what you are comfortable with. And then parental controls is very important. And there's different devices. Each device, each interface has their own parental controls. iPhone has, you can restrict the apps and the monitor what's happening on devices. You can restrict screen time. But there's third-party devices that you can use on almost any device. There's two that I can recommend. It's called Bark, like woof woof, Bark. And Family Time, they are amazing. And then there's a resource called Cloudflare Family. It's a DNS setting you set up on your router. And that blocks all adult content. So that's a great, just something to be aware of. Okay, this is a tool in our toolbox that can help. So we'll make all the links available on the website and share that there. But these are great tools. But very important, no software is perfect and cannot be bypassed. So this does not remove the need to talk to your child, to have open communication, to get to a place where we can work through this together.
I think that's important because, you can't have the app until they're 18 and then they're grown up and now they decide what they want to do and now what happens? So it can't just be there as, it needs to be a safety net. We try to not use safety nets usually. They're just there in case. So when you have a plan, you've created a plan now for how screen time is going to be handled in your house, okay? But you need to communicate it to your child. Don't just make decisions and jump on them and go, hey, we're not doing that. You need to actually talk to them, obviously. But be clear on your boundaries. Discuss concerns. Tell them, I think this is dangerous for you, and at an age-appropriate level. But make sure they understand the reasoning why. Talk to them and explain to them the reasoning. And very importantly, you know your child, right? There are many dangers on screen time. Pick one your child will care about, okay? So if you've got a budding soccer player in your house, focus on the physical effects. Tell them, do you know Bafana, those people sleep enough? Because if they don't sleep enough and they don't get good quality sleep, then they don't play well. Hey, the screen is going to affect the way... You need to be smart about this, because if you tell your child who does not care about his math marks that it's going to affect his academic performance, you know what? You're not going to have somebody in your corner. So you need to figure out what are the things that are important to your kid and match that to the danger and sell it to them. Okay? And it's important also because your kid needs to be able to self-regulate when they get to school, when they see something. And something I want to suggest is role-playing with your child. So you can actually think of a few scenarios that you're worried about, and you can say, okay, Freddie has just come to you and showed you something on his screen that is not okay for you to watch, so it's nude content or whatever. Then you can say, what do we say to Freddie in that moment? And you can role-play it with him. And then you can say, okay, what do you tell me when you come home? And that way your child actually has the tools when that situation arises to go, okay, I know what to do now. We've thought about this, we've talked about this. Because remember, they're young and they don't always... Guys, am I the only person who did stupid things as a teenager? I think we all did. You know, we're emotionally immature when we're growing up. And our kids are emotionally immature, which means this stuff that they're facing that they shouldn't have to be facing, we need to get in their corner and help them. And I just want to say one thing about this. If you are trying to establish boundaries now and you've already given too much freedom, then be honest with your kids and say, this is on me. I'm sorry. This is on me. I gave you too much freedom, but from now on, things are going to be different. And be consistent. Be consistent. Don't one day this, one day that, one day this, one day that. Be consistent. And last thing from me. Look in the rearview mirror, okay? And that means you're seeing your own face. They are watching how you are handling screens. Luke also mentioned this. Research actually says that the parents who are on the screens for like 4 hours a day, their kids are going to be on the screen 4 hours a day. When that screen time is encouraged in the house, then those kids are much more likely to end up binge watching. So I want to encourage you, and this is a difficult part for us because it forces us to look at our own habits, and we are just as addicted to Candy Crush as our kids. So we need to do this with them, okay? And that way they know you're going to be serious. That way they know you're in it, and it's going to be much easier for them when they know mom and dad are also suffering with me. So, yes, over to Harry.
So last point from our side is to say, don't fall asleep behind the wheel. Be alert, take notice, question everything, and know what is going on in your kids' lives. Be a part of what is happening. And that's the number one thing you can do to help them on this journey to become great drivers. Thank you very much.